Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So we are continuing our discussion on Vivekachudamani. I think last time we were discussing the characteristics of Sukshma Sharira. And then you have to keep that background in mind. Sukshma Sharira means the internal, subtle body. The subtle can mean something in which body is not involved. That's the real meaning of subtle. Mental or emotional. The totality of all the emotions and feelings and thoughts and aspirations, tendencies coming from previous life cycles, they're all together constituting what we actually are, minus our physical body. So the physical body has something to do with the biological, the genetic background. But Vedanta believes that we are traveling from one life to another life. And when this body comes to an end, when death happens, that only means the physical body ceases to exist. But the impressions that you have gathered in this life, with these senses of perception, like eyes, ears, sense of touch, sense of smell, and sense of taste, all these impressions will remember in our system. It will remain there. And when we are born again, we are born with a bag full of tendencies and impressions. Without the support of positive spiritual impressions or samskaras, we won't be able to remain for long interested in spiritual life. Because our mind normally gets interested, focused on external things. That is the characteristic of mind. Paranjikani Vitrana Swayambhu. So in the Kathopanishad says, mind is designed to move outward. When we see things, eyes are dragging the mind outward to the visual. When we hear things, the ears are dragging the mind towards visual experiences or audio experiences. And again, the sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste. All these are dragging the mind towards various objects of perception. That is natural. So this body is gone when a person dies. The ears are gone, the eyes are gone. But what the eyes and ears have gathered and deposited in the mental system, they don't disappear when the body disappears in the crematorium. They come back and we inherit that. So, even in the light of modern psychology, frequently we can explain this. Suppose a student demonstrates some extreme skill in understanding something. When if you're a school teacher and when you give a lesson, you suddenly find not very common but not entirely unknown, frequently happens in the life of teaching community. Frequently they narrate. They don't associate with the previous life or anything. You find suddenly some children, infants born with tremendous skills, natural inborn skills in music, in art, literature, especially in music. It's a common experience. Now, where do these skills come from? Sometimes you find in families there was not a single musician, a musical prodigy is born. Now modern genetics or biology or even psychology cannot give any explanation. The only explanation is this person is bringing it from previous life. So everyone is a lonely traveler and is carrying with him the Sukshma Sharira. Sukshma means mental, emotional, things that we can't see but very strongly felt to be real. Now, when we are discussing Karana Sharira, the third factor, so we are discussing right now what Atman is not. Koso, Anatma. The 7 questions we should always remember in this book. The whole discussion is centered around 7 questions that comes in the 51st verse of this text. So one should always keep that in mind. If you are studying seriously, you find it's very interesting. 7 questions are put to a teacher by a student. 51st verse. Ko nama bandha kadamesha agadaha kadam purishtasya kadam vimoksha koso anatma paramaka atma koso. What is anatman? What is non-eternal? Or what is that which is changing all the time? What is that which is impermanent? That travels from one body to another body. Or something that gets destroyed in one life as a physical body. So in answer to this, the teacher explains 3 major dimensions of human personality. The first one is obvious, the physical. That is not Atman, that is not permanent, that is not eternal. The second one, samskaras, impressions, tendencies, Sukshma Sharira, what we call. That is also impermanent because according to Vedanta, when you attain the highest spiritual enlightenment, you transcend the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body drops away. That is the second element of non-Atman or the changing dimension, the impermanent dimension of human personality. Third one is Karana Sharira, the causal body. And the causal body is absence of our true nature, or knowledge of our true nature. When we are not aware of our true nature, then we mistake ourselves to be many things. You find this example comes here. When there is a piece of rope lying in a semi-dark room, you may mistake that rope for many things. So 4 alternative misunderstandings are given in Vedanta. One is, you may mistake a piece of rope for a snake, which is the most common misunderstanding. Because you have seen a snake in the zoo or somewhere in the forest, its shape, size, color, and the way it lies on the floor. So we may mistake that rope for the snake, something like a snake. Or maybe a crack on the floor. When there is a crack on the floor, but there is not enough light, one may mistake it was something else. A stick is a rope, but rope will be mistaken for a crack on the floor, for a serpent or a stick. Or a thin stream of water, because there is not enough light. Now, where did it come from, this misunderstanding? You cannot say it came from anywhere because it never is there. Because the rope is there, but snake is not there, the stick is not there, the crack on the floor is not there. But this happens depending upon our own samskaras. We mistake ourselves to be many things. Now, according to Vedanta, this misunderstanding, this Karana Sharira is called Maya, Avidya, Mithya. These are 3 terms which are used in Vedanta. Very often misunderstood. Maya, Mithya, Avidya. Maya is something which cannot be defined. But we think it is real so long as we are not spiritually enlightened. Again, you can take the analogy. See, when you mistake the rope of the snake or something else, then you go in search of a flashlight, or you try to switch on the electric light to find out what it is. So, how did the misunderstanding come? You may say because you have a previous memory of seeing a snake somewhere else. But why should this misunderstanding happen? So, you can easily answer this question from the perspective of Abrahamic religion. God sat somewhere and created this world. And He put in place a set of rules and regulations. Do's and don'ts. Very easy, problem solved. But Vedanta doesn't take that approach. So Vedanta is interestingly, Vedanta tries to use reason. So in Vedanta there are these levels of evolution. You can read a book, then you should use your reason, and then you should realize, you should experience the truth. So Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. Suktya, Yuktya, Swanubhutya. So Shankaracharya, the exponent of Vedanta, used to shout this. You should always use these three tools. One is, you may read, you may listen to somebody may teach you. You can say, well, I saw God. All right. But you need not believe, oh, so he writes some, this is God's name, this is God's picture, this is God is 6 feet tall, muscular, 100 kilos, 190 pounds weight, and something like that. Vedanta, okay, you listen, okay, you tell me that's God. Then use your reasoning power. And then you should find out the truth for yourself. Swanubhuti. So Shruti, books, lectures, ideas coming from anywhere stand for Shruti. What is heard, that's the literal meaning of Shruti. Shruti Anaya, it is Shruti. What you learn by listening to means reading can be listening, any of this information, source of information. And then reasoning. And then one should experience it for yourself. So this question frequently is raised. How can you experience God? You need somebody to tell you this is God's nature. Vedanta is very radical in this approach. Vedanta tells you, okay, fine. If you tell me this is God, this is a reality, fine, no problem. But if you tell me that you alone can see God, it is your privilege, others cannot, then Vedanta doesn't agree. It disagrees. So it's true that God is beyond our reasoning, the normal reasoning we use in philosophy or psychology or science, modern science, you use reasoning. But God is beyond, or the truth, spiritual truth, or enlightenment is beyond reasoning. Okay, but it should not contradict reasoning. That's the point. The exponent of Vedanta tells you. The absolute reality, spiritual experience is beyond reason, but should not contradict reason. It transcends reason. It goes beyond reason, but doesn't contradict reason. That's the idea behind. So that is explained in this 111th verse. This Maya is neither real nor unreal, nor a combination of both. It is neither the same nor different from Brahman. It is neither a combination of both. It is neither whole nor parts or combination of both. Then Mahabhuta Anirvachaniya Rupa. It is beyond any kind of description. It is of the nature of a great wonder. This is how Shankaracharya explains Maya. And because of this Maya, by mistake, you take this world, the empirical phenomenal world, as a reality. It's changing, but we mistake it for something absolutely real. And then the 113th verse, there is a description that is Vikshepa Shakti, Rajasa Kriyatmika, Yada Pravurti Prasada Purani, Ragadayo Asyaha Prabhundi Nityam Dukkadayo Manaso Vikaraha. This is 113th verse. This is very, very important. So now, one very important point to keep in mind is this. What is this Maya? So according to Vedanta, Maya has got three powers, three dimensions. Well, if somebody wants to know intellectually what Maya is, one may say, when we are not spiritually enlightened, and because of our lack of understanding the true nature of reality, we erroneously mistake this empirical world as something permanent. We know it is changing all the time because in Vedanta, reality should not be subject to changes. Reality should be beyond time, space and causation. Reality shouldn't be affected by past, present and future. Reality of what is real in the absolute sense, the permanent, the absolute reality, should go beyond time, which means it doesn't have past, present and future. Space, it is everywhere. It is not limited by time or space or anything. And it is not caused by anything. Time, space and causation. Now, because of our absence of awareness, we are within Maya. Now, how does this Maya operate? That will make us understand it much better. First of all, this Maya has got two dimensions in our everyday life for a normal person, and it has got another dimension which is transcendental. In other words, it has got three dimensions. Trinatmika means three gunas: Sattva guna, Rajo guna, Tamo guna. Now, these are three gunas which are frequently relevant and used in Vedanta, Yoga and also Sankhya. We cannot really understand or explain what these gunas are, but we can quickly understand when we try to understand it in relation to human character. Suppose there is a person who is very knowledgeable, but he doesn't display his knowledge unnecessarily. He is very mature. He can handle whatever skills he has got. He is serene, calm and quiet, remaining in a state of perfect tranquility, peace and serenity. We may say this person has got a lot of Sattva guna. So these gunas can never be understood except by explaining how it manifests or expresses in our character, in our actions, in our life. So if a person is very knowledgeable, very wise, very, very settled, at the same time, he is not hyperactive, he is not lazy. He is serene, he remains unaffected. You may say this person has a lot of Sattva guna. Another person, very ambitious, hyperactive, every day looking at the computer with the fluctuations of the markets, Wall Street, stock markets, active, a new business. Every time he is trying to start a new business, cannot keep quiet, always dynamic, active. You may call that person hyperactive. That person is an icon of, or an example of Rajoguna, action, activity, hyperactivity. The third example, Tamoguna, the lowest, ignorance, laziness, total confusion, lethargy. Such a person, an example of Tamoguna. So there are three important characteristics you can say. That is Sattva-guna, Rajo-guna, Tamo-guna. Now, these three gunas are the determining aspects of Maya. So Maya has got a Jnana Shakti called the higher, Sri Ramakrishna calls it Vidya Maya, Sri Ramakrishna calls it. Well, as Sri Ramakrishna, the teacher of Vivekananda, puts the Vidya Maya in a very funny example, he says. Suppose a poor man is ambushed by thieves, and on the way a good man, a good passerby, a traveler comes and helps this poor fellow, saves him from the clutches of thieves or robbers. That kind-hearted, compassionate person is Sattva-guna, an example. Then somebody who is involved in doing all these terrible things, wrong things, an example of Rajo-guna. And a person who doesn't really even want to get out of the difficult situation, who is too lazy to make an effort to get out of it, it is Tamo-guna. So this Maya has got three dimensions. One is Jnana Shakti. It can take you, it can help you to get out of itself. But it is still part of Maya. So this kind-hearted, compassionate person who takes the poor fellow out of the clutches of the thieves and takes him to the village. When he takes him to the village, he may say, well, I can't remain here, I have to go back to the forest, because that's where he lives. So Maya has got this sattvic aspect. So Vidya Maya or Jnana Shakti aspect means it takes you beyond itself. To give an example, suppose you are hyperactive, Rajoguna, sometimes depression, Tamoguna. But sometimes you feel great enthusiasm and then you happen to take a great interest in reading some higher books, spiritual classics, or attending some prayers, discussion on spiritual topics. These qualities constitute Sattva-guna. So when we read or think or internalize some ideas that will take us beyond the world of momentary enjoyments, that faculty is an expression of Sattva-guna. If we can develop Sattva-guna, one day we will get enlightenment. So Sattva-guna works as a means to go beyond Maya, to take us beyond Maya. Now there are two verses here which describes Rajoguna and Tamoguna. So you can say one is 114, Kama Krodha, Lobha, Dambha, Abhyasuya, Ahankara, Ishya, Matsaradi, Astu, Ghoraha, Dharma, Ete, Rajasapum, Pravrittihi, Yasmadedu, Tat Rajo, Bandhahetuhu. So this Rajoguna and Tamoguna are causes for bondage. It keeps us bound to this world of physical sensory enjoyments. It doesn't allow us to get out of this. So one of it is this Viksheba Shakti. Viksheba means, well, I can give example again in the light of a physical example. Suppose there is something, but you don't know what it is. You mistake it for something else because it looks like something else. So something that conceals is avarana, concealing, veiling, something that projects something else in this place is vikshepa. To give an example, when you see an object, you don't know what it is, you are not aware of its true nature, so you mistake it for something else. Vedanta gives a number of examples. Suppose you're walking in the seashore and you can see some pearls, which mother of pearls, which resemble silver, but not really silver. So, but in the sunlight is reflecting on those pieces of these pearls, no real pearl, mother of pearl, the outer shell of some little insects. They are very brilliant, look like silver, especially when the sunlight falls on them. So, what happens is, because you don't know it is a mother of pearl, it's a outer shell of an insect, because you don't know it, it is concealed, the true nature is concealed, revealed. So what happens? You mistake it for silver. So silver is covering, or silver idea is covering the thing that is lying there. What is lying there is the outer shell of a sect, or some kind of insect. Some insects, or maybe some creatures living in the seashore, in the water. They have outer shell which resembles, mother of pearl frequently called. It is translated. Resembles pieces of silver, especially during midday when the sunlight reflects on them. So because of your ignorance of what it is, you mistake it for something else. So here, the concealing power is the cause of false projection. So, in fact, that concealing power is mentioned in the 115th verse, and the false projection is mentioned in the 114th verse. Esha avurdir nama tamo gunasya shaktidya vastavavasade anyatha saisha nidanam purusasya samsutehi vikshepa shaktehi prasarasya hetuhu. So the true nature of the object is concealed, revealed. So what that is called tamoguna. Ignorance is tamoguna. So tamoguna mostly functions as ignorance. Rajoguna functions as hyperactivity or action based on this wrong perception. So a Vedantin will tell you, as a classical example, modern man is always thinking of money, wealth, power, ambition, sensory enjoyment, so on, because he doesn't know his true nature. If he knows his true nature, he will not run away from the world, he will not resign his job and go to a forest, no. Point is, he can live in this world, but he will keep in his mind the truth that money is not everything. This body, this health, bank balance, stock markets, one day will disappear. Bound to disappear. We know it intellectually. Nobody believes that the world remains like this. Everyone knows. Even a kindergarten child will know the world is changing. Today's world will be different from tomorrow's world. Everything is changing. So, but then, this we know intellectually, and we have no doubt about it, but this intellectual understanding doesn't help us in our everyday life. So when we get a report from the primary caretaker that we have a health problem, we collapse. Or when we get this news that we lost $1 million in the bank, the stock markets, we collapse. We know next day we may regain. But that knowledge, everything is changing. But that knowledge doesn't help. Because we don't know the true nature of our own reality, our own Swarupa, our own real nature. So the real cause for this false projection, wrong notions. So the wrong notions are wrong ideas are listed in the 114th verse. For example, desire for external objects, anger, this kind of greed, and then pride, jealousy, envy, egoism, quite extreme competition, all these terrible things that we normally are victims of, which dominate our actions, thoughts and feelings and emotions. All these are different projections of our true nature. Because Vedanta will tell you that our true nature is Atman. Very often there is always a gap between the truth of Vedanta and the way we understand Vedanta. So Shankaracharya makes that very clear. When we tell somebody, well, this world is always changing, this world is not absolutely real, well, what does it have to do with my life? People ask this question. And if at all, how can we believe this world is not real? The world is all that we see. Nobody has seen Atman. But Vedanta will tell us that when we go deeper into our own self, we will realize this. That's ultimately what this discussion will lead in course of time. So first of all, we don't know the truth of our own self, and then we have a lot of wrong notions about what we are. We think we are the physical body, which is skin bag, and the contents of the skin bag are not wonderful things, not very wonderful things, we know, but whole human existence is focused on preserving, polishing, and trying to make this skin bag something permanent. This idea behind. So that's why Shankaracharya says all the wrong emotions and feelings and greed and pride and anger and competition, all these negative expressions of our personality are false projections called Vikshepa Shakti of Maya. Vikshepa means false projection, something appearing to be what? Something else. That something else is Vikshepa, false projection. And the truth is hidden. That's why the truth is not revealed. So Avarana means something concealing, veiling. We don't know what it is, so we mistake it for something else. These are two forces of Maya which keep us bound to this world. This bondage works like this. Life is meant for enjoyment alone. This is the most common misunderstanding we have got. Actually, all the teachings, all the great teachers of the world have tried to reverse this wrong idea. But anyway, people cannot get out of this. It doesn't mean that we should run away from this world. No. This wisdom will help us to live in this world, continue our job, maybe more efficiently, continue our profession even more efficiently, but with this kind of spiritual common sense. The only difference between a Vedantin and a non-Vedantin is a non-Vedantin will collapse when he gets a report from his doctor that he has got cancer. A Vedantin, he will not be depressed, he will not collapse, he will not fall unconscious. He will smile, but he will not keep quiet, he will work hard to get treatment to cure himself of that illness. He will not run away from the world. He will be also efficiently active, but he can act with a smile, and he can act as a master and not as a slave. That's the only difference. So these are three forces of Maya. Now, in the next 116 verse, is a very, very famous, very well-known verse. It says, the simple point is this: even highly intellectual person who studied all philosophical systems, all shastras, who is very, very brilliant, intellectual, intelligent, who has got tremendous power to grasp and understand things, and also is reading books on an everyday basis. He himself is teaching books. But what happens is, if he still has only the intellectual understanding of it, it's not enough. So even the most gifted scholar of philosophy, of Vedanta philosophy, will find himself helpless unless he tries to bring this Vedanta into his real life. Bringing Vedanta into real life can have a very, very ambiguous meaning. What it means is, when we try to use what we know, then what we know becomes a part of our common sense. Very often, we are not able to make use of what we know because we often draw a line of demarcation between intellectual conviction and emotional life. Because a man always lives at the level of mind, not of intellect. 99.9% of our life is lived at the level of mind, of emotions and feelings, thoughts and ideas, and actions that are based on these thoughts and emotions. Only a small, tiny percent of our life is lived on intellectual level. That's why prajnavanapi, panditopi chaduraha. So somebody who is highly intelligent, who is very wise, who is a great scholar, pandita chadura means very, very clever, very shrewd. Atyanta sukshmarthadrik, who can understand things very, very clearly. He can very subtle, his mind is very subtle. What happens, and again, Bhagudha Sambodhidopi, he has been taught many times. And again, what happens, is completely covered by tamoguna, by ignorance. What happens is, he is not able to understand the truth. Vyalidastamasa veti bhagudha sambodhido vispudam. So what happens is, he has been trained, he studied himself, lot of intelligence, lot of power of thinking. Still what happens is, his mind doesn't turn away from the world of everyday worldly enjoyments. That's a very important point the teacher tells you here, intellect and mind. So whatever we know intellectually may not necessarily make us wise in our actions. The wisdom shown in action comes from a kind of common sense. So when Vedantic knowledge refines and purifies our thoughts and actions, then becomes Vedantic common sense or spiritual common sense. Otherwise, intellectual understanding alone will not help us. This is a strong warning. Say, one of the greatest intellectual minds the world has seen is speaking like this. Intellect is not enough. Anyway, so right now we have interaction. If you have got doubts, you can ask. Otherwise, I can continue with the text. Most welcome.
Hi, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Can you explain more how to go from the intellectual thoughts to the common sense.
Yeah. So one way to translate intellectual convictions to spiritual common sense, that's something that we can make use of in our everyday life, is to constantly remind ourselves of what we know. And internalization of manana means thinking, contemplating on what we know intellectually. So when we go deeper into what we know intellectually, by contemplation, by constant thinking, then it goes deeper, it becomes part of our emotional response system in different life situations. That's the only way we can do that. Otherwise, there's always a gap between what we know, what we would like to do, and what our mind is willing to allow us to do. So the only way to do that is to internalize. So the internalization means thinking and contemplating deeply on what we know. So constant discussion can make it go deeper and deeper into the mental system. Reading once will help for those who are highly evolved. For them, just one casual reading or listening will do. For spiritual seekers, beginners, they should try to feed their mind with these great ideas again and again. Then the mind will be nourished by these ideas. And that's why a thought or an idea, well, which is very well grasped intellectually, you may understand it intellectually very well, it remains on the surface. But when you think and ponder over it again and again, it goes deeper. When it goes deeper, it becomes part of our emotional system, our emotional response system. Is that clear? With constant listening, discussion will help us. Reading. Yes, we may forget, but once you go on listening, reading, and then thinking over again and again, then the frequency of remembering will be more gradually direct proportion to the contemplation, and the frequency of forgetfulness will be decreased. We will be able to remember more frequently what we know, but we will be able to use it. In science, we should become an expression of technology. Then we can use in everyday life. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. So I'll follow up on his question. So I've been reading the Desert Fathers from Christian mysticism, and they talk about lectio divina, this process where it sounds fairly similar, where you study books, you read, you listen, you try to feed the mind, good food, as you would say. Yeah. And then they talk about that, they call it meditatio, meditation, where you reflect on it, you contemplate on it, you reason on it, you let it simmer inside. But then they talk about, oritatio, where you have, besides the reasoning cognitively, then you have sort of a heart emotional sort of, they talk about the effects on the emotions, the oritatio. But then they say that, like somebody like Evagrius, who's really wrote about it, he called it contemplatio, which we would call probably most of the time meditation, where they would talk about contemplative prayer. So it makes me, it seems similar, the process of reading and listening and then reasoning on it. But then you talked about that if we have this intellectual conviction, and you talked about how to the previous question, how to get it deeper into our lives of it sounds very much like meditatio, and maybe because prayer and meditation is very personal, but it seems like at some point we're going to have to sit down and meditate or pray to sort of clear up the vritti, samskara, vasana process. We want to live sattvically, but it seems like at some point we're going to have some sort of samadhi or something experience to really clear the chittam to really have this non-dual experience. I was wondering if you could just talk about that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So come to that. Now, you have to know a little bit of our human mind. Really speaking, one may ask this question, one may wonder, why do you need all these efforts to remember something that we fully know about? So if you want to know how to apply for an insurance, you go to the website and then you do it. You get a new knowledge. This is how to apply. And then you apply it. That's also knowledge. You have no doubt about it. You don't do contemplation on how to apply. Suppose you want to take a new medical insurance, you make inquiries, you get information, and then you work. You don't have an iota of doubt about it. It is obvious of this world. There is nothing obscure in that. But at the same time, whether meditation is good or bad, spiritual discipline is good or bad, we know, we read, we talk, and we discuss, it is important. But that knowledge is not like the knowledge of how to apply for an insurance. So you can see there's a wide gap between what we understand to be intellectually real at the spiritual level and the same thing at the material level. The material level, you immediately start acting on it. You don't start a big contemplation when somebody tells you this is the website address. You immediately go through and get information, and you are convinced, matter of seconds or minutes. But in spiritual life, it is not tangible. It is physically obvious. So what happens is, there's always a very wide gap between our intellectual understanding of spiritual topics and our intellectual understanding of everyday life situations. In everyday life situations, knowledge and emotional system work together. You don't wait for 1 minute when somebody tells you this is a website you should look for. You don't wait, you don't meditate, you don't contemplate. Because when you get that knowledge, immediately it becomes part of emotional system. You go ahead and do it, not in spiritual life. So the reason why this internalization is important is called a mananam. Mananam actually means you turning the mind, focusing in our mind with great concentration on what we know to reach the same level of understanding that works in material life. So to bridge this gap, so for that, mananam is important. Again and again mananam. And then, when you do this mananam, means internalization, it's a highly focused concentration called dharana. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi, the 6th, 7th and 8th stages of Patanjali Yama Niyama. So the point is, when you do this dharana or manana, what happens is, you can physically verify that a spiritual idea is as real as things in physical life. This happens. So constant contemplation, meditation is very, very important. So that's why we should focus on, so try to connect with that idea at all possible occasions. While reading, discussing, thinking, of course, in real life, one may wonder, well, I'm thinking about the higher Vedanta, but in my office I have to do something else, not Vedanta. So to remember, what we do in the office is important. It is important for sustaining this body, this life in this world, for taking care of all our needs. That is important. But there is something much higher to life. That should be kept in mind. So constant attempts to feed our mind with these ideas will slowly change our emotional system, emotional response to life situations. To give an example, suppose you are reading or listening or watching a thriller, let us say. don't do that. Some lot of shooting, lot of stunts, all those happening. At that time, somebody comes and quarrels with you. You are likely to pick up quarrel with the other person, because you are in that mood. You are watching Godfather or things like that, or some thrillers, Terminator 1, 2, 3. At that time, somebody comes to quarrel with you. You are really likely to quarrel and go to physical fight with him. But suppose you are reading Sermon on the Mount, the Vedantic book, or at least even Aristotle. If not that, at least Henry Thoreau's Walden, where this man wanders from place to place. Some kind of a wandering life. He's some kind of a mystic. His own way. He's not interested in fighting with people, quarreling with people, making money. No. He wants to enjoy the beauty and the grandeur, the sublimity of nature. If you read Walden, at that time somebody comes to quarrel with you, I have no time for it. You may turn and continue reading the book. So you can imagine, think of these two scenarios. You're watching the Terminator, one scenario, you're reading Walden, Henry Thoreau's Walden. I'm giving the example of reading and its influence of human mind, because everyone reads these days. So my point is, if you can feed your mind with good food which is spiritually sustaining, then you can respond to the world situations in a more intelligent manner. The point is, we feed our mind with toxic food and we expect our mind to be calm and quiet. We feed our body with toxic food, you can't expect to live for 100 years. That's the point. So then, there is always one problem in modern times. You don't get healthy food for the mind everywhere, because lot of competition, very complex life situations. That is true. But we should put them all under one category: the changing empirical phenomena, which is coming and going. It should not make you run away from it. But even we are working in this world, remember, the world is not a big deal. Use American language. Okay? Problem solved. That's why Vedanta has got a very simple, practical method. Otherwise, you have to think, or God is there, God created, then somebody asks you, your God created this COVID-19. What kind of God is he? He's a very intelligent person. He could have created a better world. So that question will arise. But if you read Vedanta, then you can have a more refined interpretation of the God idea, one supreme reality, the divine spark present everywhere, present in all of us. And if we refine our lifestyle, if we practice spiritual values, if we become a good human being, a good spiritual human being, then we can be truly spiritual. So that's why Vedanta will not ask you to put the blame on somebody else. We can take the responsibility of ourselves. It doesn't reject any other views. No, Vedanta accepts all. Vedanta absolutely has no rejection. It accepts it, very positive. But tells you that you can build a better future for yourself if you think of this. So being a good human being, feeding our mind with good food, simple physical fact. If we feed our body with bad food, we'll fall sick. How can we expect that the mind will not fall sick if you feed our mind with bad food? Toxic food, mind will become toxic and will fall sick. So all the depressions, worries, anxieties, different phobias already happen in modern times. So that's why everything in this world that we see is fine, no doubt, but it's only a projection. It's only a false projection. Again, you should not run away from it. Live intelligently, use this common sense. But whenever you feel, oh, it's too difficult, too bitter, too horrendous, then why should you worry about something which is not expected to be other than horrible? The world is not supposed to be a wonderful place. I tell you, if the world were a wonderful place, there will be no place for mysticism, philosophy, art, literature, anything. All the wonderful things the world, that we find in the world, came because the world, the empirical world, worldly enjoyments have their limitations. That's what makes us turn towards higher things. With the mysticism, all the great saints in Christian tradition or Jewish tradition, Buddhist tradition, not only Hindu tradition, you can find something. They always found there was some problem with this, some incompleteness, something that is not perfect, some imperfection with this empirical world of enjoyment. Not only Buddha, not only Ramakrishna Paramahansa, only Shankaracharya, Christ, any of the great Buddhist monks, the great mystics of medieval times, they were looking for something more lasting, more transcendental, more meaningful, spiritually meaningful. That search itself will help us to look at this world and our own life from a higher perspective. Okay, we'll conclude now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.